Doesn't matter.
Yeah, it's mate in a few. Guys, this is not easy. Do I think I could have won from the ending? Against this guy, probably. Against someone of my caliber, I don't know. It's tough. That ending was tough. That rook versus two rooks versus rook and knight with those pawns. That was tough. But yeah, he had to try rook g3. But king a8 was actually a big mistake. Did you guys notice? Like when he played king a8, like he should have taken more time to realize what was going on. Mate. Is there a mate? Not yet. Not yet, but like queen d6 should come close. Yeah, queen d6 is mate now. So, will this guy find mate in one? Yes, no? Bets, bets, bets? Queen d6 mate? Bets? No? If you thought the answer was yes, you'd be wrong. Oh yeah, he resigned, okay. Okay. I saw it.
Pitiful.
Hey, no one would have done as well as you. Actually, we thought you were completely lost, and you generated so much counterplay on the queen side that you turned that from a loss into a win. Everyone was very, very surprised that you managed to do that, because the guy was beating you pretty easily earlier, and you managed to create that counterplay, and you were actually winning at one point. So that was actually great that you did that, because everyone thought it was almost hopeless for you. So, so yeah, let's go back and look at it now.
Okay, so you can review it and.
Yeah, exactly. So.
Okay.
I don't know if you just want to watch it on the stream or if you want to listen to it here and then just kind of follow along on the board. But
Sure.
Okay, so yeah, it might be easier if you just follow along on the board. Okay, so I'm looking after you played. So after you played bishop f5 and he played c3, you played h6 early in the opening, and I was saying on the stream how you're kind of neglecting your development a little bit here. I mean, I know you want to give your bishop a safe square to go to, but usually once you get your bishop outside the pawn chain, you usually want to play e6 to get your dark squared bishop some scope. And you know, h6 is kind of like a wasted move. I mean, you know, if they play g4 and h4, then okay, you can play h6. But if it's not going to bother, you know, chasing your bishop a bunch of times, then it's not really necessary to play h6. So I would have rather that you developed one of your pieces rather than played h6. So
yeah, because it completely jammed me on that corner. I didn't know what to do.
Yeah, exactly. And eventually you kind of got into trouble with that. So we'll look at that in a couple of moves. But so he played knight f3, he played queen c7, and I was saying here how it's not exactly clear where your queen wants to go. Like, I mean, c7 is a perfectly fine square for it, but it's usually better to kind of finish your development of your other pieces before your queen, because in some positions you might prefer your queen to be on b6. In some positions you might prefer your queen to be on a5. Sometimes you might even prefer your queen to be on c8 to be kind of defending the bishop. So kind of committing your queen to a square that early in the opening is usually not the best idea, because it kind of gives white a target. And you know, you saw how he played bishop f4 to kind of threaten that e6 push to attack your queen. So you kind of put your queen on a vulnerable square. So I was saying on the stream that you might have preferred to either push a pawn forward or develop one of your knights, just to kind of clarify where you're going to put your pieces before you put your queen. Because usually where you put your pieces kind of dictates where you put your queen. Whereas if you move your queen someplace first, it's kind of harder to put your pieces around it, because it's easier for the opponent to create threats on the queen. So, so I was saying that might have been a little bit of an inaccuracy.
Yeah, I'm actually not that comfortable with the Caro Kann as it is. I've picked it up in recent weeks, but it's not something I would typically
play
with. Yeah.
So once you get more familiar with it, you'll kind of know where your pieces go. But just in general, in the opening, you shouldn't be moving your queen out too early if you can help it, unless there's some specific reason. And really, queen c7, you know, there wasn't any specific reason to play that move, so maybe try to develop one of your other pieces. Okay, so you play bishop d3 here, and this is a critical point because you moved your bishop back. But the problem is, after he takes your bishop on h7, your rook kind of looks silly on that h7 square. So first of all, it kind of compromises your right to castle because you moved your rook, and so once you move your rook, you can't castle kingside. I mean, I'm not saying you necessarily would want to castle kingside, but it gives you one less option. And then also, I mean, your rook is prone to be attacked on h7. So, I mean, as you saw in the game, like your rook looked silly pretty much the whole game there.
Yes.
So, more accurate probably would have either just been e6, and you know, if he takes your bishop, you can take back with your pawn, and it's actually not so bad for you, those doubled pawns, because that pawn controls e4, controls g4, and you can always blockade that e5 pawn with a knight on e6, and that's actually quite strong for you. Or you could have simply just taken the bishop and then just developed as normal. But bishop h7 kind of put your rook in a bad spot. So so either taking or e6 would have been fine, but bishop h7 kind of put you in a little bit of a bad spot because after he took and played bishop f4, okay, so now he was starting to threaten some e6 ideas, which you saw because you played g5 and then e6 yourself, which is okay because now you're getting your bishop out. But I was surprised you never played c5 because in this type of position you always like to play c5 to get your knight to c6, and your knight ended up going from d7 to b6 to a4, and it ended up staying on a4 for like 15 moves, and it was kind of out of play the whole game until you eventually played d5 b4 and created counterplay.
Mm-hmm.
But I mean, you're basically almost playing down a piece with that knight on a4 for most of the game. So usually you want to kind of start attacking his pawn chain because he has a nice pawn chain. That b2, c3, d4, e5 is a very nice pawn chain. Right. But if you can start attacking it with c5 and maybe cutting it off in half with c takes d4 and then playing knight c6 to attack it again, you can kind of mitigate what it's trying to do. But I saw you were kind of going for that square c4, and unfortunately it's a good square for your knight, but unfortunately he can kick it away pretty easily with b3 whenever he wants. So you kind of have to identify which squares are permanent homes for your knights versus which squares are only temporary homes for your knights. So so yeah, I was surprised you didn't play c5 at some point earlier. But so after queen d3 you have to play rook g7. I might have played rook h8 just so I didn't get my rook in that position, but I mean either one was fine. Okay, knight d2, knight e7. Knight e7 was good, getting your knight to f5. And then you play knight d7. So again, I would have tried c5 instead, because your knight actually prefers to be on c6, because from there it watches over d4 and e5, whereas on d7 it's only watching over e5, and on c6 it can still get to c4 in 2 moves. It can still go from c6 to a5 to c4. I saw you moved it from d7 to b6 to c4, but it just makes more sense on c6, I think. Because then also it's preparing an eventual b5, b4, and then your knight on c6 supports b4 as well. So that's why I expected a c5 here. But knight d7 wasn't a bad move. It's just a little awkward because now your pieces are kind of tripping over each other a little bit. So okay, so he castled queenside, and you play knight b6. So yeah, maybe here you should try, because your play is going to happen on the queen side, and his play is going to happen on the king side, because obviously you're not going to castle king side, because you can't, and I mean his pawns are kind of pointing to the king side, so you see how his b2, c3, d4, e5, that whole pawn chain is pointing toward the king side. So usually the side where your pawns are pointing is where you're going to play. So he's going to be playing on the king side, so you should have been trying to play on the queen side already. So I was thinking you might play b5 here first, because when you put your knight on b6, then you kind of blocked your b pawn, and one of your ideas is to play b5 and then either a5 and b4, or maybe b6 and knight c4, and then that knight's really supported by the d5 and d5 pawns both. So you have to be careful when you move your knights, especially when you move your knights in front of your pawns, that you're actually not blocking a pawn that might want to move forward. So
should I have been more aggressive with the queen over to the a?
Yeah. Oh, right. Also, knight d6 blocks your queen, so queen a5 might be a possibility as well. But I mean, more importantly, you kind of want to establish like a pawn front first before you get your pieces active. So queen a5 is easy to defend. I mean, you are attacking a2, but he can just move his king over to b1, and then you really have nothing with your queen, and you're eventually just going to waste time moving your queen back, because you actually want your pawns to be forward first. But I mean, your idea is you're going to try to rip open one of the files on the queen side, and then try to start attacking him. So
get the bishop sitting there on f.
Yeah, exactly. Because the bishop on f8 it controls c5, it controls b4. So it's not so bad that it's sitting on its home square, because I mean it's controlling a lot of squares from the f8. So yeah, b5 would have made more sense to me, I think. But knight b6, it's good that you recognize c4, because I heard when you were talking about how you thought c4 was a point it might want to go to. So it's good you recognize that. You just have to recognize that it's also a temporary point, because the b3 can chase it away. So okay, so this is the part of the game where I think it kind of got tricky. So he played king b1, so I think that was kind of like a wasted move for him. I think he should have started playing on the king side right away. So you castled, which was fine. I mean, you have to get your king safe, and obviously you're not castling king side, so castling queen side was fine. So he played g4, and now you played knight to e7, right? Yeah, so that was fine. So g4 was kind of a little bit of a overextension by him, because now he gave you the h4 and f4 squares for your knight. So,
Right.
but I mean, he's trying to play f4 and f5 himself, which is what he did. So he played bishop g3. He played knight g6, which was good. But see, now you really wish you had played your pawn to b5, because you really want to be able to play knight c4 here. But now if you play knight c4, it just loses a pawn. So that's why you kind of have to be careful that you move your pawns before you move your knights. But he played knight b3, which was nice of him, because now it allowed you to play knight c4, which was a good move, because now you're getting ready to play b5. Maybe you can even play c5, because really you don't mind trading your bishop for that knight, because then the e5 pawn will lack support, and then maybe you can try to win that e5 pawn. So you play knight d2. So now I thought you were going to play b5 for sure, because now if he plays knight takes knight after b5, you can play pawn takes knight, and then you're forking his queen and his knight, so you win a piece. So you keep your knight on that nice square c4. So again, b5 would have been strong here, I think, because it kind of playing into what you want to do with attacking on the queen side. But knight b6. So again, you're blocking your pawn, unfortunately. I would have even preferred to see maybe knight a5, just to try to trade, or even knight takes knight maybe. Just to try to trade pieces, because usually when you're defending, which is what you're kind of doing here because he has more space, it's usually beneficial for the defending side to trade pieces. So, so yeah, I'm not sure why you were so loath to trade knights there, but yeah, b5 would have definitely been stronger, and even knight a5 or knight takes knight would have been okay too, I think. Just to try to trade a pair of pieces off. Okay, so he played rook c1, so he's trying to play c4, I guess. So again, another reason why b5 would have been strong, because now it's so much harder for him to play c4 if you have a pawn on b5. So he played knight a4. So now the problem is that knight is kind of out of play the rest of the game. So it does make sense because you kind of want to activate your b pawn, which is what ended up happening, but you kind of wasted a whole bunch of tempo to do it. Like you moved your knight from b6 to c4, back to b6, back to a4, when, at certain points you could have played b5. So those loss of tempo can really hurt you. That's the difference between, probably having 3 extra moves, to start your queenside attack versus him having his kingside attack already happen already, which is what happened in the game. So he played rook f1 to get f4 in. He played bishop b7, which is fine. He played f4. So now his kingside attack is already brewing, whereas your queenside thing hasn't even started yet. You haven't even moved your queenside pawns. So now I thought here, after pawn takes pawn, bishop takes pawn, I thought you actually had a good opportunity to play bishop to g5 here, after you played bishop takes pawn. So you quickly played knight takes bishop, and that was part of the problem, I think, in your play in general, is I think you played a little too quickly. And I think the chat was saying something similar, but like you should have tried to think a little bit more about like what squares you could control here, because this knight is actually stronger than this bishop, just just taking everything else away, because this bishop is actually technically his bad bishop, because his pawns are all in dark squares, so it's kind of just biting on granite on e5, and this knight is actually providing some good defensive role, and it kind of wants to hop into the game at some point. And I know you were worried about the pawn being taken on h6, which is why you probably took, but if you had seen that you could play bishop g5, and then after bishop takes, you play pawn takes, then if you can envision that position with your pawn on g5, now that pawn is supporting a knight on either h4 or f4. And if you get a knight to f4, not only is it blocking that f file, but it's a powerful knight that exerts control over h3 pawn, exerts control over d3, over e2. I mean, it's a really powerful knight. And then you can start to chip away at his center while you're blocking the f file from him doing anything constructive. So yeah, I think bishop g5 would have actually been a very strong move, but I think you were kind of just like, oh, I can take this bishop and then move my bishop to g5. But, move order matters. So.
Well, yeah, it was forking the rook and the knight. I wanted the knight out of there.
Right.
He'd recapture with a knight. I want to reposition my knight back on c4.
Right, exactly. But like you have to understand, when you exchange, you have to see which pieces are stronger than what pieces. So like I said, currently this knight is stronger than this bishop. So after you play knight takes bishop, rook takes, and then you play bishop g5, now even that bishop on g5 is currently stronger than that knight on d2. So So after he
Okay.
moved his rook and you played rook g8, and he played rook, and then you took the knight. So I understand what you're trying to do in that you were trying to reposition your knight,